okay, so likelihood is that he was actually crucified. And then a few days later, people are claiming to see him. Maybe they're lying, but then you don't tend to go to death for something you know to be a lie. You're willing to be put to death for things that you think are true, that are false, but very rarely are people willing to die for beliefs that they don't actually believe themselves. That doesn't really happen. So they probably weren't lying.
How's it going, YouTube? We've got a pretty cool video to watch together today from popular atheist and philosopher on YouTube. If I call him a philosopher, Alex O'Connor. You probably know him from the Jubilee interview that he did, or possibly from an interview he did with Jordan Peterson, etc. He's very popular on YouTube as being a defender of atheism as a whole. But in this video, he really makes some good arguments for Christians. I was watching this and I was like, okay, I need to show other people this because it almost seems like he's right there. He's kind of a character that tries to put himself in the shoes of Christians. And I think if he keeps doing that, we might just see him really see the truth of Jesus Christ. Let's get right into this.
But I do think, generally speaking, with all of these kinds of things, fine-tuning, consciousness is another example that's broadly in the scientific realm that people think like this just can't be explained without reference to a god. Maybe they're right, I don't know. But if you intuitively were to step into a time machine and look at some people having this conversation, and you said, like imagine them looking back and saying, gosh, can you believe it? They hadn't worked out fine-tuning yet. They hadn't figured out the constants. Oh, they hadn't figured out the science of consciousness yet. I can conceive of that. Just intuitively, I can see someone doing that. But when I think about my arguments for atheism, the problem of evil, divine hidden, this kind of stuff, I can't imagine somebody looking through a time machine similarly at a conversation that I have and going, gosh, can you believe it? They hadn't worked out the problem of evil yet. They hadn't worked out divine hiddenness yet. I think these are perennial problems. So where you have these scientific arguments for the existence of God, I guess I just have more of a trust that they will one day be explained in a way that won't require recourse to a divine author in a way that my criticisms of religion will probably not be similarly resolved.
We had a great conversation in Austin.
Okay, so really quick, before we get into him putting himself in the shoes of Christians, he says a lot of the issues that he has with Christianity, he feels are not going to get solved because they're perennial issues, as he calls them, which basically means they're kind of existential issues, as far as I'm understanding. They're not something that can be disproved or proved, but I would kind of disagree with that. I do think that you can answer the problem of evil pretty good. But yes, maybe in the future we can answer as to why everything is so fine-tuned. Let me know when that happens, because it's so fine-tuned that if we were even 1 foot away from the sun or 10 feet closer, we wouldn't be able to breathe this air. We wouldn't be here. So, yeah, I mean, there's the fine-tuning question it's miraculous that we're even able to be here right now because of a fine-tuning question. So I don't know if we're ever going to be able to solve that. Alex thinks we will, regardless. But yes, a lot of his things, the problems that he has with Christianity, he believes are perennial issues, existential problems that can never be solved. And that is potentially why he's staying an atheist. Let's continue.
As you explained to me about the potential historical accuracy or inaccuracy of Jesus' resurrection, can you go through that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, this sometimes is used as an argument for the existence of God, but I think more successfully is used once you've already established the existence of God to try to establish the truth of Christianity. And that is a bunch of historical facts surrounding Jesus's alleged resurrection that you sort of have to ask what the best explanation is for. Now, you can't historically prove a resurrection, but you can historically prove events and then ask what the best explanation of those facts is. So people will often point to the fact that there was a man called Jesus walking around morally teaching people, who was crucified by the Romans, and that a few days after his death was seen, or people made claims that they'd seen him after he'd died.
I just want to pause really quick. Guys, this is not how Alex used to talk about Jesus. He was on the wave that Jesus was a mythical character. He might not even exist. Now he's talking about the plausibility that Jesus not only existed, he not only existed, but he knew these people who were the apostles. He met many people. He died by Roman crucifixion. I've kind of heard more about what Alex has to say. And at this point, Alex is in the camp that, yes, he did have apostles that believed his message, right? He lived a life in Judea. He was crucified by the Romans, and something happened. Something happened. This is what Alex believes. Something happened after that regarding the resurrection. He doesn't believe it's the resurrection story, but he does find it very interesting that all the people believed in it and they died for it. Let's continue, because he's going to make some great points for Christians. So I wonder if he's thinking about this a lot. I really do. Let's continue.
And the question is, how do you explain these facts? The gospel reliability is an interesting question in general, and people will often, on the surface level, say, look, the Bible contradicts itself. It's full of contradictions. And there are some seeming contradictions in the gospel stories. But, of course, what a lot of people neglect to consider is that when we're talking about a text as a historical document, contradictions shouldn't make us think that it's less accurate, but more accurate. If historical sources contradict each other, that's evidence of their accuracy rather than evidence of the opposite. Because if this is a mythical story that somebody's making up, you would expect the details to concur. That is, if you're questioning two suspects in some kind of murder trial or something, and their stories match up perfectly, like to the T, the timings, everything, it arouses suspicion. It seems like somebody's inventing something. Someone's coming up with a story here and trying to perfect it. Now, people have this idea that a bunch of people got together and tried to fool the world into this sort of mythical story of this man rising from the dead. Do you think they would have made the mistake of just including these blatant contradictions? I don't know. In other words, I think if somebody was making it up, they probably would have taken more care.
Very true, Alex. They wouldn't have just come up with the story, right? And then they make up parts of the story on their own. They would have tried to make it corroborate with itself. Now, this is a small point, but I think Alex is starting to see the bigger picture, like, hey, wait a second. Yeah, that theory that atheists had, right? Guys, like, listen, that theory that atheists have about all these guys sitting around a round table coming up with it, meanwhile, they just happen to be supplanting all of these miracles that Jesus did into the text without them knowing or with them knowing. So you have that aspect of it, as well as he's putting his own details into it that don't align with these details, but they're supposed to be coming up with a fake story. Why would they do that? Who are you going to convince with that? Wouldn't you be more convincing to have the same story multiple times? I mean, it's a small detail here in the grand scheme of who Jesus was, but all the points add up to these men were telling the truth, right? These men actually believed it at the very least. They at least believed what they saw, what happened. So we're going to get to some cool stuff about his thoughts on the resurrection, but I thought that this was a good premise going into it, that he's putting himself into Christian shoes.
We do see contradictions on the minor points. We don't really see much disagreement about the major points. I mean, there is still enough disagreement that I think to arouse suspicion. I mean, I'm saying this as if I'm some kind of Christian or theist. I sort of put on that hat when I'm asked to have a conversation of this kind. I mean, it does seem to me suspicious, for example, that the Gospel of Mark, which is the earliest gospel, contains no post-resurrection appearances. And then the Gospel of Matthew does include post-resurrection appearances. The Gospel of Luke includes even more. It's only in the Gospel of John that we get, for instance, doubting Thomas, which is the latest gospel, canonical gospel, I should say. That's where that arises. And in fact, the story of doubting Thomas, famously, he doesn't believe that it's the risen Christ. And Jesus says, come and touch my wounds. And he touches his wounds and he says, my Lord and my God. And Jesus says, you believe because you've seen. Blessed are those who believe without seeing. So in my view, what we have is this so-called mythological development of no post-resurrection appearances. And as the time goes on, as we get further away from the source, the stories get more fantastical.
Guys, I want to make this video really great to just give you a lot of resources here. So yes, I feel that though God put just enough proof out there for us to believe the Bible. If there was any more, we would all believe it, of course. If we had all of the evidence and we knew that it was 100% verifiably true, it really wouldn't be free will to choose God, okay? But there's enough gaps that you have to have faith. You have to seek out for this yourself. I'm I remember when I used to say Jesus was a fairy tale. I used to say that Jesus didn't exist. I used to say that even if he was real, I wouldn't believe in him. After I went down these paths, you connect all the dots. Why would the apostles lie about this? Why would they go to their death for this? You don't go to your death for a lie, okay? You might undergo some persecution. You would go to your death if you were fooled and believe it, but you wouldn't go to your death for a lie. And that's what would need to happen if this story didn't happen. Because we know Jesus did die, and what happened at that point would have to either be a lie or it really did happen. I don't know of another opportunity to say. It would either be that they replaced the body, they lied about him rising again, but why would they go to death for it? Come on, guys. Or they were fooled. So really, there's not many options here. We're going to get into Alex talking about that in a second in his take, but it really seems like that when we talk about Alex O'Connor, he's going into these rabbit holes. He's going down, and he's not just surface levelly researching it, which proves to me that he's not just being a fervent, proselytizing atheist, but he's rather really diving deep into these issues, putting himself inside the shoes of a believing Christian, seeing why they believe what they do, and putting himself inside the biblical narrative, saying, why did the apostles die for this? Right? Does this all corroborate? Does it make sense? Let me make up my own mind. Alex, you keep doing that, you're going to find Jesus, man. It's going to happen. Anyway, let's keep going.
Ending in a moral lesson to believe
without
seeing.
evidence.
Yes.
Yeah.
This to me does seem a little bit suspicious. So it is a fascinating mystery. Like something very strange happened on Easter morning. Because
Agreed.
How do we explain the fact that this man gets crucified by the Romans, and then people claim to see him after he died, and were willing to be put to death for that belief?
Right.
Now, okay, maybe he didn't die. Unlikely. As they say, the Romans knew how to kill people. And supposedly, they check. And they go to break the legs of the other prisoners as they're taking them down from their crosses. They were taking them down sort of temporarily, and they hadn't died yet. But when they go to break Jesus' legs, they realize he's already dead, which is why his legs don't get broken. And they stab him in the side with a stick to make sure that he's dead. I mean, this was a very effective method of killing people, and they knew how to do it. So it's unlikely that he just somehow survived this.
He's speaking like a Christian, but really, he's just a truth seeker. That's what we Christians are to begin with. At least we should be. Alex, you're speaking facts, okay? That is verifiable history. I'm glad that you're bringing this up. We can't come up with some false hypothesis that, maybe he just survived on the cross. Guys, as Christians, we aren't only going in blind faith. We have a lot of proof as to what we believe. We know that he died on the cross. To get there, we have to believe Jesus was a real person. Okay, we have all the verifiable evidence of that. We know what Roman crucifixion is like. I can guarantee you that Alex O'Connor has looked into verifiable history about Roman crucifixion, and he sees, wait a second. Yeah, no, they really did this. They really made sure people died. They really did crucifixion this way. It all lines up. All of the history shows that Jesus was this prolific character in Judea, preaching about a kingdom that was coming, the kingdom of heaven. Very popular person. So Alex obviously knows about this, and he's just taking the right approach, I believe. Let's continue.
Is that the guy that stabbed him with the spear, and supposedly there's blood on the spear? Or was this? Did he get stabbed?
Someone stabs him with a spear, like after he's on the cross, and it's essentially to check he's dead.
I would take the atheist argument and say, how do you even know this happened, bro? It's just a fairy tale, bro.
So likelihood is that he was actually crucified. And then a few days later, people are claiming to see him. Maybe they're lying, but then you don't tend to go to death for something you know to be a lie. You're willing to be put to death for things that you think are true, that are false, but very rarely are people willing to die for beliefs that they don't actually believe themselves. That doesn't really happen. So they probably weren't lying.
Joseph Smith, perfect example, right? Look into Joseph Smith's death. He's running away from other people, and a lot of people that were in the Mormon field actually started to fall away, say that they didn't believe it, say that it didn't happen. Joseph Smith himself is running away. He's shooting back at the people chasing him, and he jumps out the window, and he's basically murdered that way. So I can't say that he ever said he didn't believe it, but he was the head guy here. So, but with the apostles, nobody backed down from that. You would expect to see maybe one person say that it didn't happen. Nobody. It's pretty powerful, guys. You have to come up with some explanation here. I think that's what's rattling Alex. What is the explanation? What happened? Keep following that and you're going to find out the only reasonable explanation that you mentioned. You said there has to be a reasonable explanation, or I will go with the most reasonable. That's what I do. The most reasonable explanation is that he did rise again.
As maybe they were mistaken.
Fooled.
Yeah. Now, I've known you since about 2019, which is probably, it will have been slightly longer than Jesus was with his disciples, but imagine spending every single day with this person, living with this person, eating with this person, and then you've only seen him a few days ago. And somehow, imagine somebody managed to convince you that they were me. Even if I had a twin brother, they probably wouldn't be able to convince you that it was me. Or maybe they were hallucinating in groups. One of the earliest gospel New Testament sources is the letters of Paul, the earliest. And in one of those letters, Paul refers to Jesus having appeared to 500 people all at once. And in some of the Gospels, you get at least some group appearances, at least more than one person, and sometimes, groups of disciple, the 12, all seeing Jesus all at once. You don't get group hallucinations like that. And so it doesn't seem like they were mistaken either. And so if they're not mistaken, they're not making it up. What explains the fact that these people claimed to see him after he had died? And the
Guys, some context. And I know I'm really animated, but just stick with me. I'm trying to give you some good information. Context is everything. This is some context. That time in biblical history, right? The biblical history, the time that Jesus died and rose again, they had to go through great lengths to even get this message out there. They started as 12 apostles, then 11, and then they're in a room where they're like, what do we do now? Jesus died, he rose again. They didn't know what to do. These scared apostles in the upper chamber ended up going and preaching this message far and wide through Europe, and it spreads to be obviously the biggest religion today. And at the time, they didn't have anything to gain from it. At the time, they had to go through great lengths just to get this stuff written down, I bet. At the time, they had to go through great persecution. And this is just verifiable. They were going against the Roman precepts of the time, not believing in their gods. They had to go through so much when you really think about it. And so when you read in these passages the way that they say, we saw him, we felt him, we touched him, we knew him, we couldn't even write all the things that happened with Jesus in a book because they really believe it. You can feel the conviction in their words when they write it. A lot of people just need to go read it themselves. That's what they need to do. But the conviction is there. Right? To go through all of this persecution and to go through the pains and the problems, the painstaking task of writing books to compile it together to give us the proof that we have today. They had to go through so much, guys. Why would you do it for a lie? For what? They didn't even gain anything from it. They didn't gain money. They didn't even gain power. A lot of them just died. So I think Alex is starting to see that. I think Alex is grabbing onto these pieces that we've known for a long time now, saying, well, that doesn't compute with what I've known about Christianity, about it just being a fabrication. Well, why would this many people lie for nothing? Let's continue. We're almost done.
And the Christian apologists will say that the only real plausible explanation is that he really did rise from the dead.
Bingo.
Now, it's an interesting argument and it's quite powerful. However, my response has always been that this sort of process of elimination is very clever, and that's how it's usually run, but it can go the other way. I mean, imagine I were trying to prove that there was such thing as a group hallucination. I know it's extraordinary, but there was a group hallucination, and I tried to prove it by saying, well, what are the other explanations? Or maybe they lied. Well, they wouldn't do that because they wouldn't go to death. Or maybe a man rose from the dead, but come on, that doesn't happen. That breaks all the laws of physics. So the only remaining option is this. Kind of depends where you start. But it is weird. Something very strange seems to have happened on that morning.
Bingo. It is a very powerful argument. And honestly, it's the most reasonable. I appreciate you guys for watching. if you want to watch some more Alex O'Connor, he has one video I recommend from you. I don't know if I recommend that many. I do think he's just a little egotistical, but I appreciate his work in putting himself in the other person's shoes as a Christian and just trying to get there. The big thing for me is the naturalistic. It always has to be naturalistic. Everything's naturalistic. Why can't God be naturalistic? That's going to spark a fire right there. God is naturalistic, guys. That's what I think. But regardless, if you want to watch another video from Alex O'Connor, I recommend the one he talked to ChatGPT about God. ChatGPT ended up taking the side of a Christian and basically saying, due to some arguments such as everything has to be based on another thing, everything has to go back in time to a first beginning of a beginning, that it kind of proves a creator. So that's a good video to check out. But let's see where this goes. Maybe Alex O'Connor becomes a Christian. That would be pretty amazing. But yes, the resurrection story is very powerful. Alex, just continue following it, bro. Honestly, Alex, just continue. Honestly, Alex, if you're watching this, continue searching for the truth. Don't let anything interrupt your integrity as a truth seeker. That's what you are called to do. Us as Christians are called to do this, but I believe a lot of other people are as well, even if you're not a Christian. Everybody should be committed to the integrity of truth seeking and getting to the right answer. Okay? And the right answer, I will tell you right now, it is God. But we'll talk about that later. Peace out, guys.